Welcome to Live in Gratitude Daily on Global Voice Radio, a show which inspires, motivates, and transforms through sharing real-life stories of gratitude. Here's your host, Denise Joy. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Live in Gratitude Daily. I'm your host, Denise Joy Thompson, and I'm so glad that you are listening and have joined me for another episode. For those of you new to the show, Live in Gratitude Daily, it is based on the journal, a 365-page book that I am the primary author compiler, along with almost 100 other contributing authors. And the book also includes quotes and stories by thought leaders and experts from around the world. So again, thank you for joining me today. And in Live in Gratitude Daily, I interview individuals about their gratitude. I discuss with contributing authors what they have shared in the book. And I also just share my thoughts on gratitude. So what is interesting about today's show, I had an idea of what I was going to talk about. And then in looking at the book and seeing what was the messages that were coming up, there's a very, very important day of my life, and I don't remember this day, but I had written about it, and I didn't realize, because I have several entries in the book, I didn't realize that I had written about this. And it is something that is so important. It solidifies who was going to be my mom and dad. So April 14th is when my adoption was finalized. And, when I was thinking about what I was going to write on different days, I wanted to choose days that were very important to me. So I have an entry on my mom's birthday, my dad's birthday, I think their anniversary, my brother's birthday. So just throughout the book, I am sharing things that are important to me. So for April 14th, I wrote and I dedicated my day to all children. And it's very interesting how adoption is so important to my life and how it came up in several ways. So I'll tell you about my story. So I was adopted as an infant, and I have always known that I was adopted. There was no secret. I don't remember at what age my mom and dad explained that I was adopted and what that meant, but it's something that I had always known. Now, my mom and dad had adopted a boy, my brother Kevin, several years before me, and we are not biologically related. So they got me I was born in November in Iowa, and I spent several weeks in a foster home. And then my parents, I think, got me in January. So I might have been in the foster home for 4 to 6 weeks. And then during that time, the early years, then mom and dad were still meeting with a social worker, right? They had to prove that they could take care of me. And so it wasn't until a few years later that the adoption was finalized, legally finalized, and they were legally my parents. And they had all of the legal rights of parents, right? They just, at that point, they couldn't just give me back. And So it wasn't something, sometimes children can have difficulties dealing with the idea that they are adopted. It can affect their identity. Most of the time it does not. Now, I was what they call a healthy infant adoption. I had not been taken away from my birth parents. My birth parents decided, probably due to their young age, that they were not able to take care of a baby. And so they gave me up for adoption to a couple who could and were at the stages in their life to take care of a baby. Now, one of the things in regards to adoptions that long ago and even several years ago, usually the parents went to an organization, a service organization, and applied to be parents. And it was a process. You had to have a home study, have a background check, and be deemed reliable and financially able to take care of an infant. So my parents had done this twice, right? So when they got my brother Kevin, and then they had to go through the process again. So I was adopted through Lutheran Social Service. And so what's interesting about what has happened, or what did happen, is when I got off of active duty in, what year was it? The first time, 1998, I think. So I returned to Iowa. I'm a clinical social worker, and I ended up getting a job with Lutheran Social Service. And I met the social worker who did the home study, the social worker who placed me with my mom and dad. Now, how often does that happen? I mean, first of all, if we look at how many children who are adopted and they go into social work, and then they end up getting a job at the same agency, the very same, not just the overall agency, right? Because there's Lutheran Social Services in every state, but the same center, and meeting the social worker who placed that infant. So that was really, really interesting. And no, not just because I worked for Lutheran Social Service does not mean that I had access to my record, because I had a closed adoption. And so I ended up getting into adoption work. I worked with children in foster care. I counseled birth parents in regards to the adoption process and if they wanted to choose adoption. Since I worked for Lutheran Social Service, I could not counsel on abortion. If that was something they wanted to know about, then I would do a referral for them to get information from another agency, and then we would talk about what their options were and what they wanted to do, what was best for them in regards to the decision that they had to make. So I spent several years working with birth mothers and adoptive parents and the babies. So one day, shortly into working with adoptions, I got to go pick up my first baby. And so I went to the hospital. I had been counseling the birth mother, and she had decided to give the baby up for adoption. And so I was going to the hospital to get the baby, to take it to the foster home, while the adoptive parents were waiting to get the baby. Now, there's a waiting period for birth mothers to make the decision, right? So during that time, our agency did not give the baby to the adoptive parents. It went to a foster home as the mother had the 72 hours to decide to go through with the adoption. So I got the baby, and I'm walking out of the hospital, and I have the baby in the carrier. And then all of a sudden, it was like I had this sort of out-of-body experience, because in some ways, I saw myself. I realized this is the process that I went through when I was born. And it was so surreal. It was so surreal realizing that I was experiencing with this baby what I had experienced. And so it was almost like I had even this better understanding of what this whole process was about. And so what else was very interesting was that after I dropped off the baby at the foster home, I was meeting my mom and dad for dinner. And so the course of this day meant so much, because when I got to the restaurant, and so I was able to share with my mom and dad this experience, and they understood what the other adoptive parents were waiting for, right? As they had waited for my brother and I. And I was able to explain to them, like, I understand. And, so now we're at this restaurant, and we all have tears in our eyes because we were so grateful for what had been brought into our lives. And that they were able to experience being parents with my brother and I. I was able to experience having them as my mom and dad. And it doesn't mean if I had stayed with my birth parents that I would not have had a great life. I don't know that, because that was not my path. That was not my journey. I can be very grateful, and I am very grateful for the path, for the journey that I have had in my life. And so I continued to work in adoptions. I ended up going into private practice, and I became an adoption specialist in the private practice. And so I then worked with adoptive parents and birth parents. I worked with parents adopting internationally. I worked with parents who are adopting within their family. I mean, I just loved that work and the connection that I had. I remember one child that I placed with a family who lived close to my parents, and they knew my parents, they knew me, and it was sort of an open adoption. And so my mom got to see that child grow up through school. And so every so often when the mom and the child would go into the school where my mom worked, they would always mention and ask about me, because I was an important part of their journey. I helped them to adopt this little boy. And so it was so wonderful to see these connections, to see how grateful adoptive parents are to adopt children, and also working with the birth parents to help them to make an informed decision and to be able to understand the process. And when I was adopted, it was closed adoptions when you went through an agency. But now, most of the adoptions are open. And the adoptive parents, the birth parents, the children have contact. And that can be a wonderful relationship. And it comes down to being grateful for that situation, being grateful for the opportunities. And there is no way of knowing what journey and what path would have been better, because that's not where I'm at. So I am grateful for the journey and the path I've had. I'm grateful for where I can go from here. And it's unknown. There are so many opportunities that can enhance my life. There are so many opportunities that I can decide to do. And I think about being grateful for the opportunity to be in the family I have, to have my mom and dad who have raised me, who were very grateful for having my brother and I in their family. And so when you look at your own life, look at the opportunities that you have had. Not focus on what hasn't gone your way. Not focus on things that have not happened. Because we don't know what the outcome would have been. We know what the outcome can be today because we are here today. We have choices to make today because of what has already happened, because what has brought us here. What has brought you to where you are today, and you now have a choice of what you're going to do tomorrow. Regardless of the situation that you are in today, you have a choice of what you're going to do tomorrow and what that decision is and what that opportunity is. And that is what we can be grateful for. Everything that has come into our life provides us with an experience, provides us with knowledge, provides us with understanding. We then get to use everything that life has already provided us to take our next step, to make our next decision. For me, my path started when I was born. It continued when my birth mother decided to give me up for adoption. The journey became even more known as I grew up with my mom and dad. My journey is still unfolding. I have the choice of what I'm going to do next. And I am so grateful for what life has brought to me. And that doesn't mean that I've always made the best decisions. I'm human, right? So sometimes we make a decision, it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't have gone down that road. But you know what? I can turn around. I can turn right or left. I can check my GPS, my internal GPS, my GPS of gratitude. And that will help me make my next decision. So I hope all of you will continue to join me in Live in Gratitude Daily and increase your gratitude GPS to help you make the decisions that are in gratitude, that you know when you think about them, that they will take you on a path of gratitude, of thankfulness, of being blessed. If any of you would like a copy of Live in Gratitude Daily, compiled by myself, Denise Joy Thompson, with other contributing authors, you can find Live in Gratitude Daily on Amazon.com. Also join me in Live in Gratitude Daily. I would love to have your feedback. I would love to take your suggestions of what you might want to listen to or talk about. And definitely, if you would like to be a guest on Live in Gratitude Daily and share your gratitude and share your thankfulness and how you're blessed, then comment on one of the shows, send me a private message. You can also join us in our Facebook group, Global Voice Radio, and listen to Live in Gratitude Daily and listen to the other shows of other hosts. So I hope you enjoyed today's show, and I hope that you live in gratitude daily. Thank you for listening to Live in Gratitude Daily with Denise Joy. Join us every Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern on Global Voice Radio.